So, welcome back to IPHA Talks, where we interview professionals within the health field and STEM in general. And we basically hope to spread the message of interprofessionalism, collaboration, and the importance of exploring different career paths before you commit to a certain career for yourself. I'm Dina.
And I'm Jenna. We are excited to announce today's speaker, and hopefully by the end of our conversation, there will be more individuals aware of the importance of non-academic skills in any professional field, including health. Our guest today is a multifaceted professional with great advice for young professionals. After graduating from Stanford University, she began her project management career by launching Grown Up Truth in 2013, which is a magazine to guide graduates, and Sister Circle in 2017, which is a large-scale online community to support Black women in tech-related professions. Finally, with her platform on Instagram, Unfiltered by Lexi B, she hopes to advise and guide young professionals through career tips and advice for professional development. Welcome, Alexandra. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Amazing. So we'll start off by, if you could just give us a little insight into what a day in your life looks like right now.
Well, a day in my life right now looks like staying in my apartment and minding my business and wearing a mask. That's very important. So that's my life, really. It's just navigating, I'm sure like everyone else, navigating a full-time job. And I'm a senior program manager for privacy at Twitter. And then also just navigating my household.
And jumping onto the career part of this talk, could you talk to us about the philosophy when it comes to choosing career path, or like how do you give yourself the freedom to sort of explore different paths that there are?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that there's two answers to that, and I'm going to answer it first in the way of a career in which it is required to have a specific academic degree path, and then in careers that don't. So careers that require a specific academic career path, and to give example, like the medical fields, in order for you to be a doctor or a nurse, there are certain things that you must do, right, before you are allowed to talk to a patient. And there are certain classes you must take, there are certain degrees you must receive, there are certain grades you must get to get those degrees, et cetera, right? Certain tests you must take. And so I think for those careers, it's sometimes a lot harder to be more flexible because you have in your head since you were 5 years old that you're going to be a doctor. And then something hits at 25 and you're like, well, do I want to do this? Do I not? And what I've learned, at least with my friends who are doctors and also really good friends of mine who started the doctor path or the nurse path and then said no to it and then completely changed the trajectory of their life and their career,
wow,
is that it's a lot harder to be flexible in that because of the amount of academics it takes in order to acquire that dream.
Mm-hmm. And shifting gears, how do you start speaking up for yourself? Like, how do you overcome the fear of being shunned? Or I know for me, I always try to be accommodating to everyone, even if I'm unfairly being treated.
Yeah.
And I think that's just the way society is. But how do you overcome that? Because there's a lot to be said.
Yeah, three things. First and foremost, I think it's important to find elders. And I say elders and not mentors. There's two different things. Mentors and sponsors are people that are put in practice in workspaces, regardless of what you do and where you work, right? Everyone says that if you want to climb the ladder, it's very important for you to have a mentor and a sponsor. And those people are not going to know you well. Mm-hmm. Sometimes a mentor will know you well if you really start that, you really begin to build that relationship. But usually mentors are people that see something in you and say, oh, she's really good at that. And then you can bounce ideas off of. Great, right? They can help you navigate what's happening at work at that time. A sponsor is someone who sees something in you and says, okay, so I don't know them well, but the next time I'm in a meeting, because I'm in a position of power, and they say, hey, who'd be great for this? I'm going to say your name, right? An elder is someone who knows you well. An elder who's someone who literally cares about you and you as a person, not just as a person working in a career, not a person working at the hospital, not a person working in engineering, but a full blown out human, right? An elder is someone who also sees you as a woman or maybe a person of color or maybe a queer person. An elder is a person who will love on you when you need it and who will also, grab you by the throat when you need it, because we always need those times, and be like, sit down.
We do.
Right? An elder can talk to you in ways that your mentor cannot. Right? And so I think it's important to have an elder.
Jumping into the next question, when making decisions, how do you distinguish between an intuitive feeling that you're supposed to do something versus a feeling from fear or discomfort that you shouldn't maybe go towards doing something?
Yeah. So again, I think, things are not black and white. I am always fearful. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. There's a lot of discomfort working as the person that I am in the technology industry every single day. What I've grappled with, that I had an elder who always reminds me, it's okay to be uncomfortable. I literally remind myself that on a daily basis. Sometimes you'll hear me say that to me by myself in a room out loud. Like, it's okay to be uncomfortable. I think the question is that once you decide to be okay with being uncomfortable, the question is, now what? Right? And so a lot of the stuff that I do in my work is a gut feeling. And the funny thing about it, as a woman, women have these superpowers, and one of them is a gut feeling. When you think about your life as a child, if your mother was in your life, how many times did you do something and your mother wasn't looking at you and she was like, stop doing it? Right? Like this whole narrative around women have eyes in the back of their head.
Yeah.
Women have this intuitive gut superpower that we're like, that don't feel right. Right? And I don't know what that is. I don't know why it doesn't feel right, but that doesn't feel right. And so I think in your career as a woman, that is your superpower. What messes you up in your career is if you decide to use that gut feeling without actual fact. So what I always do is, my gut feeling navigates me a lot in my career, even in the daily decisions that I make with the team that I work on. And my response to that gut feeling is I listen to it. And then I start talking to myself and doing the back end work of why that doesn't feel good.
How do you deal with like the glass ceiling and like all the institutionalized discrimination that we face just as women or being of color or Black? How do you deal with that? Because I personally feel like sometimes people just see my scarf and then they have their own assumptions of me. And it's hard to sort of break that shell and let them know, like, I am a person, I have my own thoughts and feelings. But yeah, how do you navigate that?
So I think a couple of things. I think that number one, we have to, I hate when people talk about careers as if like the institutional racism, sexism, discrimination that's in a company is not actually outside its doors, right? So I always tell folks, like, in order to change that, people need to change the way this society works. Because this is why the company works that way. Because everything outside the company says that's appropriate. So everything that you deal with as a woman and a woman of color in a company, and for example, for my work at a tech company, right? Those are all things that are outside the walls of my tech company. So if I want to change the stuff inside my company, right, there has to be change outside my company, right?
In the context of that, everyone kind of talks all about a work-life balance and being able to balance your career and your mental health and all things like that. We wanted you to talk about that and then give advice to people, but it's kind of hard to give universal advice to every single person on how they should have a work-life balance because it is unique to each person. So maybe we thought you could give what work-life balance looks like for you, and then people can just try to implement that into their life and translate that into their own.
Yeah. Well, actually, I disagree with you. I think that there is a universal work-life balance, and that is that whoever invented work-life balance is a horrific person. Like, whoever invented that term and that phrase, horrible, horrible person. That's the universal tool. There is no such thing as a work-life balance, because by definition of that phrase in the English language, that means that you are spending the same amount of hours between work and between life. And remember, earlier in this conversation, I said that that's actually not possible, because you will always, if you are career focused, and some people aren't, and that's wonderful, but if you are career focused, you will spend more time in your career than you will at anything else. So if that's my standard of defining things, work-life balance is a phrase that is actually not, it's not possible. It's impossible.
And jumping into the next question, what is your view on rejection? Like, I know up until like last year, I took rejection very personally for some reason, especially being a student and like trying your best and feeling like the rejection is an attack, but how do you overcome that?
That's a hard question for me to answer. And the reason why is that I have been in positions since I was 7 years old of being rejected and getting used to it. And I can explain that. So when I was 7, I started doing a lot of musical theater, to a lot of auditions and getting rejected. And so I always tell people, usually the people that are very comfortable with rejection in life are the people that do things when they're children that require them to be rejected over and over and over again. So imagine being from 7 or 8 years old, being in auditions 2 to 3 months, every 2 to 3 months, and 8 out of 10 times hearing the word no. So I had to deal with the whole, this is about me at 8.
Yeah.
And then by 10, it was like, whatever. Right. And so personally, it's a hard question for me to answer because I'm just so used to it that I don't take it personally. I will say this, and this sounds very ethereal, which for a long time until recently, I would hate these kinds of answers. And now I say them, is that you will never be rejected for something that was meant for you. So I don't take rejection seriously because for me, my answer is always that wasn't for me. It's okay for it to hurt. I get rejected all the time. And there are things that I really want that I get rejected for. And I can have that moment of like, that kind of stung. I really wanted that. But then also forward thinking, that wasn't for me then.
Lexi, what advice would you give your younger self? And knowing what you know now, what would you hope your future self works on?
I think the biggest advice that I would give myself at 18, 19, 20 years old, and I've hinted this before, is I wish at those ages I took the time to decide what I like and what I don't like instead of just following the path. I felt like my college career, and I really enjoyed my college experience. Like Stanford is heaven to me. I loved it. But I'm not going to lie. There were moments in college, probably my freshman and sophomore, like my first 2 years, where looking back on it, I was doing things or pretending to like things because everyone else liked them.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. And honestly, speaking from being here, I've learned so much. And I've enjoyed this so much, and I have so much to think about now. And we'll leave all of your links to your pages on our website and our YouTube comments thing. And thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of IPHA Talks. And we hope you have a great week.
Thank you, Lexi.
Bye.
Bye.